Today we have an interesting question posed by the community, because we are on the eve of our third reset of 10.1.5 and we've gotten somewhat of a split within the player base. Because initially some players came up and said, hey, look at how the population, look at how the popularity of 25 plus keys, so how the highest level players are playing right now, and look at how broken it is. You know, we have our Exodia, our good old 5 specs currently dominating the meta, and look at how awful this is. You have just 5 pillars across all of the specs and classes in the game who are far above everyone else. That's not good, it's not balanced, it should be changed. Then there was a kickback, there was a counter from the other part of the player base who said, no, this is actually the balance in Mythic Plus. You have to look at all Mythic Plus key levels. If you want to be, a little bit more exclusionary, you can look at Mythic Plus 14 level and up. Even then, though, you can still see that it's much more even, it's much more balanced, it's not a nightmare for all of the other specs, not part of the meta comp, and at the end of the day, the players in 25 plus keys are barely, not even 7,000, while the players in all key levels are almost 600,000. So why are we talking about a problem with the balancing if the 25 plus keys are roughly 1.2% of all of Mythic Plus players? Why should we care? Why should we balance or even, have to run to balance tune the 1.2% of the player base? If we look at what the rest of the players are doing, they have no problem inviting other specs in their groups, so that shouldn't really be an issue. So we shouldn't really be that worried about the balance of Mythic Plus, because at the end of the day, the 25 plus range of keys is only going to affect a very small part of the player base. That is what we are talking about today. Whether or not it's good or if it is right or wrong about this different perspective that different types of players have on the situation that we have right now in Mythic Plus, which is quite unique, as we will see soon. Now, obviously, let's start from the most obvious of the nitpicking, which is the fact that even if you look at all key levels or 14 plus level, that more average casual level, things are still not very, very cool. At the end of the day, you still see Assassination Rogue being played almost 20 times less than Subtlety Rogue. You still see, if you put Marksmanship and Survival together, they are played less than half of a Beast Mastery Hunter. You still see Unholy Death Knight being played some 10 times less than Shadow Priest. You still see Arcane Mage being played some 6 times less than a Frost Mage. You still see a Feral Druid being played some 3 or 4 or 5 times less than Guardian Druid and Balanced Druid. Preservation and Augmentation Evoker combined are less played than Augmentation. So even in the casual range, even in the all Mythic Plus key range, you still have plenty of unbalanced situations that should be given a look to. You don't even have to go and look at the 25 plus range to see the extremes in terms of problems with balancing. So definitely, even if we were to look at the more casual side of the player base, you can still notice certain specs and the situation of the balance of certain specs requiring some help from Blizzard. That being said, one of the things that is being said the most when you look at the very high level of key is the definition of the trickle down effect. TLDR, what players do at the very, very top, at the very, very highest level, is going to trickle down, is going to be learned and tried by the players one level below them, and that level will then be copied and tried by the players one level below them, and it will keep going further and further down the community based on what the best players are doing. This is not a term specific to WoW. It can happen in other competitive games where you have YouTube content or streams or guides which will tell tell you a certain thing from the best players, and then everyone else is going to try and imitate what the best players are doing. You know, Diablo 4 has come out, there is the new season out, the normal players, the average players are going to go and look at guides of what to build a certain class, what abilities to use based on what the best or the better players are saying. That is why players say that the balancing at the very high level still matters, even if you are of the opinion that, well, those players are just 1% of the player base. You know, I will never ever be there. You know, I'm already proud of having done my 20 key to get my teleports, and I'm done with Mythic Plus, so why should I care about the situation, about the balancing of someone doing 28 keys? That's why many players point out how it matters. Even if you're not part of that player base, even if you're not part of that very niche community of super high key levels, you know, even you casual plus 18 runner or plus 20 runner, you might have mentioned yourself, or you might have heard others point out how, for example, even in a plus 20 key, players are starting to ask for a Guardian Druid, or players are starting to ask in a plus 19 for an augmentation evoker. Now, can you complete a plus 19 without an augmentation evoker? Can you complete a plus 20 without a Guardian Druid? Of course you can. But then many players who agree, who follow the meta, who follow what the top players do, even if they themselves are not clearing super high keys, those players would be asking you, sure, you cleared a plus 20 with a Prot Warrior, a Survival Hunter, a Feral Druid, an Assassination Rogue, and a Mistweaver Monk. However, could you have cleared that key more easily, more safely, quicker, faster with a Guardian Druid, a Holy Paladin, an Augmentation Evoker, a Fire Mage, and a Shadow Priest? And the answer, statistically speaking, is yes. Yes, you could have done the key more quickly. Yes, maybe you didn't wipe, maybe you didn't cause one player to be triggered and leave the key. You would have had a higher chance of completing the key with those stronger specs, even though it was just a plus 20 and not a plus 29. It's a similar concept in many other games. Maybe you're playing other competitive games with meta established like Dota or like League of Legends. Can you go and jungle with Jace? Yes, you can. Does that mean it's gonna be easier than playing with much more popular and much more meta jungler? No, it's not. And for WoW, you have something similar. When top players, when the best player establish a certain meta, many players will agree, many players will follow that meta because they basically trust. They trust those players that are good to know what is best for the completion of the key in this example. And since you also want to complete your key, sure, it's not a plus 30, it's not a plus 28 or even a plus 26, it's just a plus 21, but for you, it's an achievement. For you, it's a difficult one, it's a dangerous one. You have never even stepped into a plus 21 before, so it's dangerous territory for you. So what do you do once you enter dangerous territory? You try to get the strongest chance, the highest possibility of you for succeeding, and that's when you will go and look at who is the strongest, who is the most powerful, and who can give you the highest chance of succeeding. And that means you will most likely decline the Mistweaver Monk who signed up for the Holy Paladin, who is 5 item levels lower than the Mistweaver Monk, because you know that Holy Paladin is the stronger meta pick. That's why many players still point out that even though this meta, this unbalanced power levels at the very, very high key range only matter for some 1% of the player base, they still have effects on the rest of the community. The problem that is being pointed out right now is that if you look at the current situation in Mythic Plus, the very, very high range of Mythic Plus, you can find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specs at or close to 10% popularity, all 5 of them, and nobody is even remotely close. If we go all the way back to season 1 of Shadowlands compared to this, you can find that in the very high key range at the time, the most popular ones, being Fire Mage and Balanced Druid, were above 10%, only 2, not like the 5 we have now. If you go to season 2 of Shadowlands, at 25 plus range, you have 1, maybe 2 Windwalker and Frostmage. Only the infamous Season 3 of Shadowlands gets somewhat close or even to the unbalancedness that we have now, with 4 specs, well above 9% popularity, almost 5 with Windwalker. And then we end at Season 1 of Dragonflight in the 25 plus range with a single one barely at 10% and not a single other spec. This was much more even, much more balanced. You had plenty of other options in the meta, even at a high range. You had Retribution Paladin, you had Subtlety, you had Shadow Priest, you had Restoration Shaman and Enhancement Shaman, you had Destro Warlock, you had Resto Druid and Balance Druid, as well as Havoc Demon Hunter. You can even see by the nice range of colors in the high keys, multiple specs being picked left and right. Besides the tanks, it was quite varied in the choices compared to what we have now in the very high key range, which is just a set of 5 colors. That was the debate that came up in the community recently about the unbalanced state of the top keys in Mythic Plus and whether or not it should matter or whether or not it does matter to the rest of the community that doesn't really partake in keys so difficult, in keys so challenging, whether or not it's going to have an effect on them, even if they don't partake in that level of content. So you can, of course, have your take on this, whether or not you believe it's going to affect you as a player in your own keys or not. For you to let me guys know whether or not it has affected you in any way, whether or not you feel yourself, even in your own range of keys, whichever that may be, if it's a plus 15 or a plus 20 range, whether or not you have felt the oppressiveness of this composition, whether or not you yourself start looking for these specs way more often, even if you are not even remotely close to being a top challenger for Mythic Plus title at the end of the season, and yet you still want a Holy Paladin or you still want an Augmentation Evoker in your plus 20 key, for example. Let me guys know what has been your experience so far at the beginning of this 10.1.5 patch. At the beginning of this 3rd week of the patch, we are now leaving each other on this Tuesday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, and as usual, you can still support for free. You can like and comment down below to help to cheat together the YouTube algorithm, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. So, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, get it? That's why it's bad, because if the trickle-down effects start at the top, then the more varied and the more choices you have at the top, the better will be for the rest of the players who will try to copy that.